Hello and welcome back to Drafting 1. Today we'll be discussing pictorials as a whole and specifically focus in on isometrics for the drawing assignments in class. Let's start out by having a look at what pictorials are as a whole. If we've already covered this information, then this will be a nice little refresher for you. So first thing to note is that if we are looking at our sheet of paper here, first thing to note is what a pictorial is. Pictorials allows you to see three faces in one view. Meaning we would generally be able to see our front, top, and right side. This is generally how your drawing is going to be set up. Your front view is your most important, and it's your largest and most descriptive. If you have to identify the front view of your object, it again will be the largest and the most descriptive. However, if you're given an isometric or given a drawing in general, usually it will already be oriented in the correct way, so you don't have to do that thinking part on your own. So again, we've got pictorials, three faces in one view, meaning you don't have to turn the object at all or see a different view in order to see all three faces. Those faces are your front, your top, and your right side, and your front is always going to be your largest and your most descriptive. We have several different types of pictorials that we'll do in this class, the first being an isometric, the second being an oblique, and the third being a perspective. We'll go into more detail later about obliques and perspectives, but I do want you to have a general idea today of what they look like or a way to compare against the isometric, which we'll dial in on today. So your isometric, if we're drawing just a simple cube, it starts with your front edge or whatever is the closest to you, and then your right side will be over here, your front side will be here, and your top side will be here. You've got your front side where its top and bottom edges go up at a 30-degree angle. The right side, same thing. The top and the bottom edges go up at a 30-degree angle. And then your top here sits on top. Here's your front. Again, that largest and most descriptive side. Here's your right side, and then your top surfaces, and you can see 1, 2, 3 surfaces all in one view. Your oblique is a little bit different, and there are several different types of obliques. Regardless of which type you're drawing, your oblique will start with the front face. Your front face, again, is going to be your largest and your most descriptive. For a cube, it would just be a square. And then each of the edges go up and back at 45 degrees. And then you can roughly close them off like this. So again, you'll have your front, your right side, and then your top all visible in one view. Your obliques can kind of change depth-wise depending on what type of oblique you're drawing, but nonetheless, it will still be oriented the same way. It still has depth lines that go back at a 45-degree angle. Those depths can just change depending on the type of oblique. And then last, you have a perspective. Perspectives are dependent on vanishing points. So you could have a 1-point perspective that looks very similar to an oblique. You could have a 2-point perspective that looks very similar to an isometric. And then you could have a 3-point perspective that looks nothing like any of those and is probably the least realistic. But just generally speaking, you've got your isometric, your oblique, your perspective. All of them, you can see 3 different surfaces in one view without having to change the orientation. And each one has its own pros and cons. But today, we'll focus in on the isometric. A couple things to note before we get started. You always want to start with your front edge and then your depth and width lines go back at 30 degrees from the horizontal axis, and I'll show you some of that here in just a bit. So to make things easier for us, I have some isometric graph paper specifically for isometrics. You will see that it looks a little different than your traditional graph paper or your orthographic paper or quad ruled. Different verbiage for the same thing. This is your quad ruled or orthographic or generic graphing paper, and then this is what we'll be using for our isometrics. You'll see that you have little triangles popping up all over the place, lines going in different directions. So you have vertical lines going throughout all the way across. That'll more than likely be your front edge that you start with. And then you have lines going in this direction, and you have lines going in this direction. If I pull out a few tools and make a horizontal line in this direction, doesn't really matter where you put it, but if you have a horizontal line here, let's just pop that there, going straight across corner to corner of those little diamond or triangle shapes, you will see that if you line up a horizontal edge, and this triangle in particular, you'll see that each of these lines is perfectly aligned to it. This is a 30, 60, 90 triangle, meaning this angle here is 30 degrees, this one is 60 degrees, and then this one obviously is your 90 degree or your right edge or right angle of your triangle. When we're drawing our isometrics and when we're using our T-squares and things, this triangle here specifically is acting as my T-square just for the sake of the environment that I'm currently in. And then this one will line up and help me draw those 30-degree lines as we're getting into more complicated shapes. So if you look here, you'll see that you've got this nice vertical edge here. If I'm just drawing freehand for a bit, you've got this nice vertical edge here. This is where you would start an object. This is where I started those squares that you saw, those cubes that you saw in the very beginning. This here is what we're specifically talking about. And then you'll see from each of the endpoints it goes up and back from each one. If I wanted to draw a cube, I could take each of these corners and go up and to the right 30 degrees or up and to the left. Each of those edges is going to be up 30 degrees from this horizontal line here. And in order for us to do that, you'll see that it comes from, again, from this type of alignment here. However, we don't really need to do that on this graph paper here. Let's just get a good feel for it before we get into making things neat and clean. So here, if I wanted to draw the front face, I always like to start with the front because it's the largest and the most descriptive and get the most information at one time and have less information to carry later. So if I wanted to go here, if this were a cube, this one's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, following along this edge here where it's already mapped out. So 6 this way. And then 6 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, following the grid. And then down this way. Super simple to start out. This will be your front. Then we'll do the right side. Same thing, if it's a cube, it should be the same dimensions all the way around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Connecting there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Connecting there. And then you can connect that top and bottom edge to give you your right side. And then you've got your depth and your width coming from the top. So this edge here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They should meet. to create the top close part of this cube. Again, just to reinforce, what are the rules for creating an isometric? One is we're starting with the front edge. Number two, your depth and your width go back at 30 degrees. And where from? The horizontal. And then also another thing to note, that isometric means equal measure. Which just means that each of your dimensions will be true. We're not scaling them up and down for any reason unless we want to scale the entire picture up or down, but you don't ever want to change a specific dimension, so depth, width, height, any of that. Whereas in your obliques and perspectives later on, those can change depending on the situation, but your isometric is always going to be proportional. If your width is divided in half, your depth and your height will as well. If your height is split by a third, your depth and your width will as well. So if you change one of them, you want to make sure you change all of them. That's where that equal measure comes into play. It should be proportional. Nothing should ever look distorted in this situation. This is going to be your most realistic and most used type of drawing, aside from an occasional perspective just for aesthetic reasons. But this is where you'll get true measurements with your technical drawings, our most important drawing that we have. So now we're going to use some graph paper here to draw 10 different simple shapes to get a feel of how to draw these types of drawings before I send you out to start using things like tools, triangles, scales, things like that. So we'll start simple with some grids and draw each of them together. One more other thing to note for testing purposes. I showed you guys you have all these lines going in different directions. This line here, if it were an axis, would be your y-axis, your vertical. This one going in this direction would be your x-axis, which is where your width is. Your height is usually along your y. Your width is usually along your x. And then your depth is usually along your z. So this is your depth. This is your width along the x. And then your height along your y. In between each of these axes, in between your y and your x is 120 degrees, and then in between your horizontal and your x and your z is going to be that 30 degrees. So this is where that 30 degrees comes into play that you will often hear mentioned. And then one more time, just to solidify, if you have your axes, your standard 3 axes that we often reference, x, y, and z, you'll see there's 120 degrees here. And 120 degrees here. That's where that 120 comes into play. Where traditionally, if you were looking like at this oblique where you have a 90-degree angles here on your triangle, they become 120. Okay, so now I'm going to get a fresh piece of paper, a fresh piece of graph paper. like this. And then, so you can follow along with me, we'll be using this PowerPoint presentation that's linked in the assignment, and we'll be drawing each one of these shapes. So what I would do is we're going to make each of these blocks 1-to-1 ratio, so that when we're looking here, we're just drawing one block at a time, and you can fit all of them on one sheet of paper. So we'll draw each of them 1-to-1 ratio, each little wooden cube. One second. Each little wooden cube is equal to 1 unit on your graph paper, and we'll start with this one here. So as you can see, the front face of this is normally where your front face is going to be. If you're given a drawing that's already oriented, more than likely in the correct position for you. So this is your front, and we'll start with this front edge here that is the closest to us. So we'll have 1 here, and then we go back 2, and then up 3. So if we're drawing that together, I'll try to zoom in some for you. We'll start up here, and then we're going to start with the front edge. That was just 1 block. And so I'm just going to say this is number 1, and we'll start it like right here. It's got 1 block right there. And then the bottom of so your front is going to be over here. And the bottom of it is here, and it goes back 2. So 1, 2. Like that. And then it has a height of 3, so it goes 1, 2, 3. Makes a nice little L shape. It goes in 1 this way, and then down 2, and then over to the right 1, and you should end up right back where you started. Okay, so now we have our front face here, and then we'll take each of the corners and go back the opposite 30 degrees to create that depth. If we reference back to our picture, you'll see that it's only 1 block deep all the way through, which will make this super simple for us. So I can add 1 block of depth here, 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 and here. And then we can close that off. So going over, keeping these lines parallel. This one had a line, so it needs one on the back. There's this line here that's vertical, so it needs one on the back. This one needs a partner there, and this one needs a partner here. And that will complete your first isometric. Okay. Let's have a look at the second one. Here's your second shape. This one's going to be a little more difficult to pick out which front you want it to be, and then also which direction you want your stuff to go in. So I would start here and have this piece come out at you. We can add that on in a second. But if you see that the back piece is very similar to the first one that we drew, it's just shorter. So instead of going up 3, it's going to go up 2. And I would also recommend that you're doing this in pencil. I know I'm currently drawing in pen, but that's just so that you can see it on camera better. So I would definitely start out in pencil. I would start mine in pencil too, and then I'll go back in probably and color over it in pen so you can see it better. So for number 2, I would start with a very similar sketch to here, except it'll just be a little bit shorter. So again, we'll start with that same similar edge. Going up 1, and then over 2 along the bottom, and up 2 this time instead of 3, and then closing that off right there. So going over, down, over to get that little short L shape. You can then go at each corner and add your depth. So if we look back, you'll see that it's the same depth all the way through along the back, and then we can come back in and add this shape here in a second. So we'll add one this way, one this way, this way, this way, this way. And feel free to pause this video and rewatch any sections if I'm going too fast. And so then just like we did here when we started closing our shape off on the back, we'll do the same thing. This one needs a partner. If this is going this way, you need a parallel one on the back. This one needs a vertical parallel line. This one needs one here, and then we need one here as well. And you'll see these look very similar. You're just missing this one little piece that comes off of the front. So generally I try to start with whatever is the closest to me and work back. Sometimes our shape is a little bit more complex and limits our ability to do that. So now we're going to go back and we're going to add this piece to the front here. So you'll see down one, it starts to come back out towards you, and this one is following in line with this edge and coming out towards you as well. So we're going to go to this corner, and this corner, and draw down and to the left, that 30 degrees following our grid spacing, just for one block, and add that feature in. So down one, and then we're going to go follow down to the left one edge, take this edge and continue it down one more, and take this corner here that falls in line with that figure down into the left one right there. And then we'll connect these. So take this corner and go up, and then take it and go to the left. And you'll see that it's starting to look a little confusing because of this edge and this edge that you can't really see in real life. So I'm going to erase that to make it a little easier to understand. And it's really important to note here that as we are drawing construction types of lines that are helping us, guiding us in creating our drawings, it's important to keep those light before we go back in and darken things. So now we've got this piece coming off the front of it, and we'll just need to close in the front square of this piece. So taking this corner down and bringing this one over to meet our starting point. And you can see this looks really close to what we're supposed to have, but we've got some things that are just making it look not real. So for one, we've got an edge here that is actually there. If it's there, we need to make sure that we draw it. And then you've got this vertical edge here, and I will show you those things on the actual drawing. So here you've got this edge here that we were missing, and then this vertical edge here that we were missing. So once you go back in and add those, you can see it makes it look much more realistic. Now, what you should do is go in and darken the lines that you want to keep and erase anything that you don't. I'm just going to go in with my pen so that you can see it better on camera. This will act as my super dark B lead that I would use to go in and create my object lines once I've finalized it. Like that. And then you can go in, or I'll go in and erase, especially since I'm working with pen. Some things you want to be super careful about are like open corners, like this right here. You want to make sure those things are closed off. And you want to make sure you don't have overlapping edges, like something like that. You see how that comes off of the edge? You want to make sure that you don't do that. So go back in and erase any of those mistakes that you have. And again, you should be able to erase because you shouldn't be using pen. I'm only using it for this video. Okay, so that takes care of our first one. And go back through and draw the second one. See this guy here? Again, very similar shapes. We've got this L shape here, just kind of laying on its side. I'm going to start with that. It's 1 unit tall, 3 wide, and 2 tall on the back, and then we'll come back in and add some depth after. So for number 3, I'm going to start somewhere along here. We've got 1 unit tall. It goes back 3 along the bottom, 2 along the top. It has a height of 2 on the back, a height of 1 on the front, and making that L shape, following my grid spacing. This is hopefully getting easier as we go through. I'm going to minimize so we can reference back to our drawing again, or our shape again. So we've got a depth of 1 here, but on here it goes back 2. So we'll try to do all of that at one time. So what's probably easier is to go ahead and draw this right side over here. So like here, it has a depth of 2. So from this corner, go up and to the right 2, up and to the right 2, and then close that off. Now you've got your front and your right part of your right side. And then this part here on the top is only 1. So we're only going to go back 1. Make sure you stop at 1. Don't keep going. Otherwise, it'll line up here and will not be the same shape that we're supposed to be drawing. Take this corner up and to the right. And then you can close this one off. If we reference back, you'll see that this piece here sticks out of the top by 1, and then it goes back to this chunk of shape here. So we want this one to go down 1, creating this edge. And then you can continue it back 1 more so it falls in line with this part that we already drew. Closing that off. And now you don't need to draw anything else because you can't see it. So that brings us to number 4. That brings us to number 4. This one's a little bit more complex. It does look very similar to the first one that we drew. So I would start here for this shape, and then we can add this piece on the back. You can see how hopefully you're noticing I break it down into chunks. I'm going to do this L, and then I'll add this piece here on the back. So for number 4, I'm just going to start with that L, same shape here. Starting with that edge that's the closest to me. 1 this way, 2 along the bottom, 3 tall, 1 along the top, down 2, over 1 should bring you right back where you started. Looking back, I have a depth of 1 through here, but you want to be super careful here, not drawing edges that aren't necessarily there. So here I'm going to go back 1 just to get that piece along the top, doing as much from memory as I can before I carry on. And then this should come down and fall in line there. If I'm looking back, we've got a piece that comes off this way. So this little corner needs to come down, and this little corner needs to come down. But we don't have this edge yet, which is why it looks a little distorted at the moment. So let's start here, close this off, and then we can come down in this direction. So we'll start here and close this off, and then a vertical line, and then we can come back in this direction 1. So down 1, down 1, and then close that one off too. So now you're seeing those 2 edges that may have made it difficult for you to see the overall shape before. Now this corner is going to go back 1, adding that depth. This one you don't want to draw that edge because it's not really there. This one needs to continue on back 1, and then they should line up together, completing that top viewpoint of this section. If they're messy, it's okay. The more we practice and when we start using our tools, it'll get a lot cleaner. We're just practicing the orientation and getting acclimated with the way that these pictures are supposed to be drawn before we get into the specifics of trying to make everything perfect. Okay, so now for number 5, a little less than halfway done. Number 5 looks like this. This one's a lot more complicated. Let's maybe draw this one from the right side. So this is the right side, and then this. So we can draw this piece, and then we can pull this out to the front. So let's start with this backwards C shape, adding a depth of 1, and then we can pop this on the front of it. So again, you want to start and definitely be drawing in pencil. I'm going to start this one in pencil so that I can go back in and just darken later. So I'm going to start with that C shape, and it's just 2 along the bottom, up 3, 2 along the top, down 1, over 1, down 1, over 1 to get that C shape. And then we'll take each of our corners and go up and to the left 30 degrees by 1. 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, and there, and there. And don't forget this one too. Adding that depth in there. And then you can take these edges and create their parallel partners to close off the back. And hopefully these are getting easier. And then you'll see we're just missing this piece here. So what you should do next is take this corner here and go out 1 more towards you this way. You'll see this corner goes this direction. So go up, and then where it intersects here, we're going to go back in this direction towards you. And if you connect these two, you'll see that top of that cube that's supposed to be sticking out. If you take these 3 corners and go down just 1, you should maybe see that cube popping out a little bit more. And if you create these parallel partners down here, you'll see the rest of that cube taking shape. And then you can go in and erase any of those edges that are not visible, that shouldn't be there, and it should look a lot more realistic. And then I'm then going to go in with my pen, darken things up a bit. Be careful with your edges. Try not to let them overlap, although mine are pretty messy at the moment. Alright, that brings us to number 6, which is this one. I would probably draw this one in the same orientation again and then add this on last, creating this sideways T figure and then adding this one. So for number 6, I'm going to create this T figure. It has a height of 3, a width of 1 along the top, down 1, over 1, down 1, back to the right 1, down 1, back to the right 1 more, ending up right where I started. So this shape here, it has a depth of 1 all the way through. And then you can create those partner edges that should be parallel. And then we'll come in and add this shape here. So the top of this box should be in line here. And then you can take these 3 corners. Don't draw this one because you can't see it. Our shape isn't transparent, so you don't want to draw anything that you can't actually see. So take these 3 corners and bring them down and to the right. 1 cube worth. And then these 2 should line up on the same line. These 2 should be on the same line. And you'll see you're only missing the profile of this cube. Again, go back through, clean up anywhere you have mistakes or lines that aren't visible from that vantage point, and then you can go back in and darken. You should be using pencil So if you make any mistakes, you can go back and fix them. And as we progress, you'll make less and less mistakes. This line shouldn't have been drawn. That line should not have been drawn. So if you drew that one, go back in and erase it. I can't erase mine because it's ink. Okay, so that brings us to number 7. 7 looks like this. We'll maybe start with this profile this time, work our way back, and then add these two. I would probably start here, just to kind of give you a different perspective since we've started the other ones pretty consistently the same way. This one might be easier from this viewpoint. So we'll start with a rectangular shape. Again, I'm going to draw in pencil because I'm working my way back. I don't want to draw anything that I don't want to draw anything in pen that I don't necessarily need. So I'm going to start here and let's look back at our sizing. It's 2 this way and 2 this way, 2 this way, but ends up being 3 along the back. I'm going to say 2 here and then up 1. So a 2 by 1 by 2 by 1. And we want the overall depth to go back 2. So this one's going to go back 2. But this one's only going to go back 1 because we have a cube floating right here. So I'm just going to go 1 here and then 1 here and connect this vertical edge there. If you look back, you'll see this one pokes out to the left here, and this one is up on top on the back side. So I'm going to take these 2 corners and go down and to the left along that 30-degree line for 1 block and then connect them. And now you'll see they need some depth, or they need some width as well. We have the depth here and the height. This one already got its width, so this one needs some width. And they should line up with one another. So when you draw one back, it should fall along that same line. Right there. And then close off for that vertical edge, which is the height. And then if we look back one last time, you will see that this is floating along the top, this back section here. So we want to go in 1 block, up 1 block, over 1 block. It does blend in with this corner and then come back down. And you'll see that little T shape it starts to create. You can close this square off. It'll help make it look a little more realistic. And then this top corner needs width. This one needs 1 block of width, and this one needs 1 block of width. And then you can close them off. So this one needs a parallel line. This one needs a parallel line. This one needs a parallel line, creating the rest of that shape. We have 3 more. So for number 8, let's have a look back. This one's a lot simpler, taking us back to how those first couple shapes were. Probably easier to start with this L shape and then bring this one off to the side. Let's look back one more time. Okay. All right, our L has a base of 2, a height of 3, 1 across the top there, and then down 2, 1 across this top piece, and then down 1 more, closing off our L. The L has a width of 1 throughout, so I'm going to add 1 here at each corner. and then fill in those parallel edges for the back side. Like that. And then we'll see that we're missing these two blocks. As we're going through this, I hope that you'll start to see like this block. It's there, but you just haven't drawn it yet, and you can kind of see this one as well. So from this edge, we want to continue over, and this will be that back edge of those two blocks. It'll stick out the front. We'll take this corner and go down into the right 2 blocks. This one down into the right 2 blocks, and this one down into the right 2 blocks. You'll see them fall in line with one another. We need a vertical edge here, and then we need a line parallel to this one here, a line parallel to this one here, and then close off this front. So these two are parallel with these two that we need to erase now because we can't see through our object. It is not transparent. Therefore, those lines should not actually be there. So 2 more remaining. Let's have a look at number 9. 9 looks like this. 9's a lot more complex. It looks like an L, but the L is laying flat now. So we would probably be best served to start with this L. You could draw it from the top view and create more in less steps. So let's try that. Again, another perspective to look at it from. Let's have a look at those dimensions one time. 3 by 2. So let's start number 9 from the top viewpoint. So we'll start our L somewhere like here. So let's say we'll start here. We'll go over 3. And then from this corner, we're going to go down and to the right 2. This one just 1 to create that L. And then you'll see that L coming to life there. And then I would add depth to it, or height to it. So if this is the top view, it has depth and width. We need to add some height to it. So take each corner and go down 1, closing it off. Remember, this line needs a parallel line, this one needs a parallel partner, this one needs one, and this one needs one to create that shape. And then if we reference back, you'll see this piece. So it's almost like this back section makes a T, and then this is coming across it. Oops. So coming back here. So we should have that T shape along here, depending on where you want to start it. So I would start it probably back here. So we're going in 1 and then up, over 1, and then back down 1, like that. I like to keep this here until I'm completely done. It helps me line things up a little better. So this one, it needs to come forward 2 times. So 1 block here, and then another. 1 block here, and then another. 1 block here, and then another. And things are starting to blur a little bit, so just be careful. And so this one and this corner line up, running parallel to this. And then this corner lines up, and then there. And so now it looks super, super messy and confusing. Number 1, because we have edges that we don't need anymore and shouldn't be there anyway. And then number 2, our drawing just got a little messy. So we're going to go through and try to erase some things that we don't need anymore. So we don't need this line, and we don't need this line either. So erase both of those. And then I'm going to darken this in after I erased a bit of it. And so same thing here, going to erase this line like that. And then same thing here. And then same thing here. So then once you go in and clean it up, it looks a little bit better, but even still, it can be difficult to read it. So sometimes it helps if we add shading. So if you just imagine like this is where your sun is, you want surfaces that are the furthest away from the sun get the least amount of light, and then the ones that are closest would be the brightest. So if you were imagining these front pieces would be the furthest, they would get the least amount of sun, making the darkest. So if you wanted to add some shading in there, especially since we're doing it freehand, to help really set those surfaces apart and give it more of a realistic view, darken the front ones the darkest, the side ones just a little bit lighter, and then keep your top ones the brightest, and that kind of helps. It also kind of hides some of the imperfections that you may have unintentionally put on there. And so then our last one is number 10, which is this guy here. So from this viewpoint, it looks like a T. I would probably start with the T and then add this one to the front. If you really wanted to, you could start here and then work your way back, and so then you wouldn't have so many things to erase. So just for the sake of doing it a little different, let's start with this small square here, work back one, add the T onto the back. So let's start here. So we'll start with that little square for the T here. It's just a 1 by 1 by 1 square. These two corners go back 1. And then the bottom one, you want it to go back 2 to connect to the rest of that T. Like that. So then if we go back, you'll see that this T goes up 2 before having this coming across. So we can add some height of 2 here, here, and here, and then we'll add this piece on the top at the end. So we'll take this corner and go up 1, this corner and go up 1, and then this one and go up 2, like that. Looking back at our shape again, you'll see that this edge here may disappear behind this shape. We'll get to that here in a second though. So now we have this whole section here, and we just need our T going across. So I would take this corner and go this way, this corner and go this way. So take this corner and go down into the left 1, this one up into the right 1 along that 30-degree line, and then go up, carry it all the way across, and then back down, and you'll see that this edge started to disappear behind this one. If you want to know what that is in real life, it would be this edge disappeared with this one, or they kind of faded into one another because of the angle that we're looking at. And then your T needs to be 1 unit this way. We already have this bottom section, we just need to do the top. So this corner needs to go back 1, this corner back 1, this corner back 1, and then this needs a parallel line here. This one needs a parallel line here. And so this time, because of where we started, we didn't have to erase anything. We are missing an edge here, which was maybe making yours look a little distorted as well. So don't forget this edge. And then if you need to add shading to make it look more realistic like we did over here, then by all means, please do. Again, remember the darkest is whatever is the furthest away from the sun. If you change where you want your light source to be, then you would change where your shading would be. So that's just kind of personal preference for the most part. So just be mindful of that. Like that. So that makes it look a little bit more realistic. You by no means need to go back and add shading to these, but if yours are messy, then you can. If you want to change where the light source is, so say you want your light source to be like here, instead these would be the brightest. These would be a little shaded. And then the top ones would be your darkest ones. So it just, again, depends on where you want your light source to be. And as we progress through the class and start picking up tools, you won't be shading anyway, so that's not really necessary unless yours are just difficult to see or were messy as you started out. Some shading can really help make it look a little cleaner and more realistic. So that is it for this section. When we come back for the next video, we'll be using our scale or ruler, depending on what you have, and our 2 triangles. This one, which is your 30, 60, 90 triangle, will be used to create each of these angled lines that we had here on our graph paper, and then we'll probably use this triangle or a T-square just to create that horizontal origin.